Hey there, Tony with Villa Property Inspections. Thank you so much for joining us today. Over the last several months, I've been getting a lot of questions regarding SB 721 balcony inspections. I thought I'd break them down for you today and go over all of the ins and outs of the balcony inspections and some caveats that you should probably know about. But before we get started, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that like button down below. It really does help get the information out to other people just like yourselves. Okay, so today we're going to cover the most common questions that I've received on the phone over the last several months regarding SB 721 balcony inspections. What is SB 721? Now, that is one of the most basic questions that I still get frequently. If you're a property owner or property manager, you probably already know this, but I'm going to cover that briefly for those who don't know. What must be inspected? What is the deadline for the inspection? Who can inspect the balconies? Now I'm going to go off a little bit on a rant a little bit later on in the video about this because there's some things that I agree and don't agree with. So you're going to want to stick around to the end of the video to hear that. What must be inspected? Are drilled holes required? Again, I'm going to go off on that a little bit later on. Do I need an engineer? What do I do with a report once you've gotten it? And what if repairs are required? And this is where I'm going to go off a little bit at the end of the video, so you're going to want to stick around. Beware of contractor. What is SB 721? So there's two dates to not necessarily remember about SB 721, but that are important for SB 721. June 16th, a little bit after midnight, on that balcony that you see in the photograph right there, this was in Berkeley, California. This is a 5th-story balcony. There were about 8 people standing on that balcony, and they were celebrating somebody's 21st birthday, and the balcony collapsed completely from the 5th floor, killing 6 students. So in September of 2018, consequently, the bill was passed, SB 721 was passed, requiring balconies to be inspected in all apartment buildings. Shortly after that, SB 326 was passed, requiring all balconies in condominiums to be inspected just as much. And today we're only going to cover SB 721 for apartment buildings. So what buildings must be inspected? SB 721 is for apartment buildings with 3 or more units. So if you have a duplex, it's not a requirement, although I still recommend it. Again, SB 326 is for condominium complexes. It's slightly different than SB 721 and some of the requirements, but I'll cover that in a different video. When must this happen? This must happen by January 1st, 2025. So the deadline is coming up really quickly. Our phones have really started to ring lately from property management companies who are trying to get a hold of this. The demand is increasing as we get closer to the deadline, so it's going to make it very difficult to schedule inspections. If you haven't scheduled your inspection yet, I highly recommend that you start looking for an inspector. Of course, we'd love to work with you, but start looking for an inspector. Put it on the calendar right now. I anticipate that it's going to be much more difficult to schedule your inspections, and I also anticipate that some of the companies are going to start gouging as far as inspection fees. After your first inspection, you're required to do your inspection every 6 years. I'm going to leave this photograph up just a little bit longer so that you can take a look at it. Basically, everything in blue is what is required to be inspected by SB 721. Rooftop decks that are supported entirely by the structure directly below it are not required to be inspected. Anything that extends beyond the exterior walls of the structure of the building is what needs to be inspected. Cantilevered walkways, cantilevered balconies, stairs. Now, stairs, there's a little bit of a gray area in that SB 721 does not really say whether steel-framed stairs need to be inspected. I think they should, because if we're there already, the critical point on steel-framed stairs is not so much the stairs themselves as much as the connection to the wooden structure of the building. So this is what SB 721 reads. Structures including their supports, railings, balconies, decks, porches, stairways, walkways, and entry structures that extend beyond the exterior walls of the building and which have a walking surface that is elevated more than 6 feet are designed for human occupancy and rely all or in part on wood-based products. So basically any wooden structure that extends outside the exterior walls of the building is what falls under SB-721. This is the balcony in Berkeley after the collapse. As you can see, all of the floor joists were completely rotted out. There was water that had been getting inside the structure that nobody noticed due to lack of maintenance. And when those people got on the balcony, and granted there was probably too many people on the balcony, but it still should not have collapsed in the way that it did. So who can inspect your balconies? A licensed architect, a civil or structural engineer, a general contractor holding any one of these licenses, individuals that are certified as building inspectors, and it has to be a nationally recognized organization, and that's only determined by the local building department, the local jurisdiction, which ones are acceptable and which ones are not. Interestingly enough, and this is the little bit of a rant that I'm going to go on a little bit later on, is that the original version of SB 721 had this to say as part of the bill: no recommended repair shall be performed by a licensed contractor serving as the inspector. Shortly after the bill passed, legislatures came back and removed this section so that your inspector can also be your contractor. I highly disagree with this. I think it leaves a lot of room for unscrupulous services and practices, and I think it's a huge conflict of interest. But I'll dive more into that a little bit later, so stick around towards the end of the video. What must the inspection and the report cover? Basically, it's identification, it's identifying what's there, telling you what condition it's in, and what we recommend. So identify the load-bearing components, the beams, the wood posts. Is it a cantilevered balcony? The railings. What do we have there? The waterproofing system, is it a magnesite floor covering? Is there tile on the floor of the balcony? Basically anything that's designed to keep moisture out. The current condition of the balcony or the elevated walkway or stairs. Expectations for future performance. That's basically, hey, if it's in this condition and you don't do anything, the expectation is that it's going to fail. Recommendations for any repairs. And then we put on our reports recommendations that extend beyond SB 721, that are recommendations for future maintenance or upgrades. Now, it's not necessary. We do delineate that in the report, showing that it is nothing but a recommendation. But if you're going to have us out there already, we're going to try to provide you a little bit additional service so that you can plan accordingly, you can budget, you can schedule with your maintenance team. 15%. What that means is that if you have a large building, and we've done a lot of large complexes and a lot of large buildings, and let's say you have 20 cantilevered balconies, SB 721 says that you only need to inspect 15% of that, which equates to 1.5 or 2 balconies of that particular type of balcony. I always recommend, if we're going to be out there, inspect all of the balconies and the stairs, but I understand that it's cost prohibitive for some of these larger complexes. We did one recently that had over 40 buildings in the complex, and I can understand that's cost prohibitive. But if you can, I always recommend inspecting all of the balconies. We're already there. We can inspect all the balconies. You can use that report to plan, to budget, and to schedule with your maintenance team or your contractors. What if repairs are required? If it's an immediate threat, and by immediate threat, it looks like the balcony is going to collapse. It's leaning significantly. There's a lot of rot damage. The railings are falling off. That is considered an immediate threat. And when it is an immediate threat, access to the structure must be prevented immediately, and the owner is required to make immediate repairs. So basically, like the yellow tape that you see on the photograph there, you want to prevent the occupants from stepping on that part of the structure, walkway, balcony, whatever it may be, until the repairs are done. We are, in this case, and this is written in the law, we are required to submit a copy of this report to the local building department in that situation, and only in that situation. For all other repairs that need to be done that are not an immediate and imminent threat to the occupants of the building, we're not required to submit the report. Usually in that condition, if the balcony is in that bad of a condition, building permits are going to be required, and that would be obtaining building permits like any renovation that you would do to your building. If it's non-immediate threat, but it still requires permits, if the stucco, like in the photograph here, has to be removed and repairs have to be done to the railings, or shoring up of the frame, the floor joists, reinforcement have to be done, that requires a permit. And again, that's just a typical process of obtaining a building permit like you would for any other renovation in your building. Now, SB-721 says that you have to obtain your permits within 120 days of having received our report. And once you've obtained your permit from the local building department, you have 120 days to make the repairs, unless the building department granted you an extension. And again, that's just a typical building permit process inspection with a local building department. We don't get involved in that. If it's not an immediate threat to the occupant and it does not require a permit, this falls under the maintenance and minor repair category. About 90% of the balconies that we inspect or that we have inspected since the beginning of the year fall under this category. And by minor repairs, I mean where the floor meets the wall junction. Sometimes you get cracks and it's not properly sealed, or where the railing meets the floor, it's not properly sealed. Those fall, minor cracks on the magnesite, those fall under minor repairs and maintenance. In that case, no permits are needed. We don't need to submit it to the building department. This is purely for you to plan, to budget, and to schedule with your maintenance team or contractors to get the work done. What do you do with your report? You do absolutely nothing with your report for now. SB-721 is a state law, but currently there are only a few local cities in Southern California that have enacted their own local ordinances that relate to SB-721. However, there are other cities that are in the process of enacting their own local ordinances, and at some point most local cities are going to have some kind of an ordinance about this. Now, what I've seen so far and what I hear from some of the people that I know that work in local cities is that most local cities are adopting SB-721, the state version, verbatim. They're not changing anything on it, and they're just adopting it verbatim. City of Los Angeles, for example, adopted it verbatim, and they also opened up an online portal for inspectors like us to submit copies of reports when it is an emergency situation. And that's the only time that most local cities are going to get involved with balcony repairs, is if there is an emergency situation. Now, can a local city make the law more restrictive? Yes, they can. They just can't make it, they can make it more restrictive, they just can't make it less restrictive. Most of the cities that I've spoken to just simply have told me they simply don't have the resources to enforce SB-721. The only time that they get involved is if there is an emergency situation that requires permits and an actual building inspector to go and visit the property. Otherwise, they just don't have the resources to see if you've made your minor repairs, your maintenance, whether you have your reports in place. At some point, they probably will, but as of right now, they don't. So this is my rant. Warning, this is a little bit of a rant. I have been a licensed contractor since 2000, so that's 24 years. I've been an inspector for 26 years. I don't agree with certain parts of SB-721. Shortly after SB-721 passed, literally like days afterwards, contractors started popping up posing as balcony inspectors. And originally, when the bill passed, it said that your contractor can't be your inspector. And I'll leave it to you to speculate why that was removed from SB-721. My guess is that there was some lobbying done that allowed contractors to also act as your inspectors. I think it's a conflict of interest. I think based on the conversation I had with the Contractor State License Board, they've received a lot of complaints about contractors that have unscrupulous practices and have been pressuring people to do costly repairs that aren't really needed on their balconies. Now, leads me to this here. On our blog, on our website, you can check it out. There's a blog article that I wrote about tips for hiring your contractor and how to protect yourself from unscrupulous contractors. It goes a lot more into depth than I'm going to go in here. Eventually, I'm going to make a video about that. But if you get a chance, go on the website, check it out before you work with any contractor. Is destructive testing required? I'm going to put a link down in the description of the video that's going to take you to the state website where you can read the entire SB-721 law as it is written right now. Nowhere on that law does it say that destructive testing is required for your inspection. By destructive testing, there's a lot of companies, construction companies, that say that you need to drill holes into your balcony so they can stick a camera in there, or cut pieces of your stucco away so that they can stick cameras in there to take a look. It is not required. It is a gimmick, in my opinion, to get you, to scare you to sign up for construction services that you really don't need. I have these cameras, everything ranging from the tiniest camera all the way to the big cameras that we use for sewer inspections, and I still don't think that it's needed. Which leads me to my next item here. Do you need a structural engineer to do your balcony inspection? The answer is no. It's not required that it be a structural engineer. I've spoken with a lot of management companies that have told me that some of these construction companies are sending out structural engineers. They're charging them upwards of $1,500, $1,800, $2,000 to do an inspection. Sending a structural engineer to do your initial balcony inspection is like sending a surgeon to apply a Band-Aid. I don't think you need it, and it's an unnecessary expense. If you do need it, when we go do inspections, the majority of the inspections, like I alluded to a little while ago, fall under maintenance and minor repairs. We have had a couple that we can see that there's moisture damage under the balcony, the stucco's falling off. We can see the cracks on the floors. We can see the cracks along the walls. We can see that the floor is tilted. In those situations, and only in those situations, do I recommend opening up the structure. And I have recommended to our clients, say, hey, look, this one doesn't look good. I think you should have your contractor. You find your own contractor, because we don't do any construction work. Find your own contractor and have them open it up and take a closer look. But like I said, about 90% of what we've looked at falls under maintenance and minor repairs. So no, while you can send a structural engineer to look at your balcony, I think it's an unnecessary expense. Again, like I said, we are 100% unbiased. We don't sell any construction services. We don't do any construction services. So we'd love to work with you, but I understand if you want to work with somebody else. But come check us out. We are going to be this week on Thursday, August 22nd in Long Beach at the Apartment Owners Association of California's trade show. Our booth number is 223. We're going to be raffling off an entire inspection for an entire building for balcony inspection. So drop by, say hi. It's always a fun event. And again, here's my information. My name is Tony Escamilla. I'm the owner of Villa Property Inspections. We've been in business for 26 years now. That's my email address right there. That's our phone number there. Please don't hesitate to reach out. If you have any questions, drop me an email. I'm very good about responding, and we'd love to work with you. Lastly, please don't forget to hit the like button. It really does help with the algorithm to help push out this information to other investors and property managers just like yourself.